The World Health Organization is lying. They're telling us that they don't want to take away the power of governments and be the world's decision maker. This is part of the pandemic treaty that we've been talking about. This is not a conspiracy. I'm going to show it to you from the horse's mouth, the horse being the World Health Organization. I think it's because so many people are waking up to just how terrifying this is and asking their governments to please not sign this document, not sign their country up for the WHO pandemic treaty. Well, now the head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, is saying that reports about the pandemic treaty that are telling you that they're scary are fake news. They're misinformation. They're false. That in and of itself is misinformation. Here's this tweet from just a few days ago. It says, we find ourselves in a time where fake news, lies, conspiracy theorists, misinformation, and disinformation are rampant. These are individuals who, whether they genuinely believe it or not, are spreading false claims about the pandemic accord that require our attention. Some argue this agreement will undermine a country's sovereignty by giving power to the WHO. They claim that the WHO will impose lockdowns or vaccine mandates on countries. However, it's important to make clear that these claims are completely unfounded, untrue, nonsense, have no basis in reality. To be clear, the accord does not grant the WHO any such authority. I strongly urge all countries involved in the pandemic negotiations to actively counter these false narratives. Let's remember this. He's asking your government to track and stop your freedom of speech. Like, hey, don't let people say this anymore. That is an important paragraph. He says it's important for them to communicate with their own citizens, assuring them that this agreement explicitly protects their country's sovereignty. There should be no room for doubt or confusion on this matter. Okay, authoritarian much? No room for doubt or confusion? How about discussion? Like, okay.
No, they love to control Google search results.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, discussion leads to doubt, and you can't have that. So no discussion.
Right.
That's out. No.
Okay, well, while we're free to discuss it, I would just like to remind you the things that are written in this document that prove that he's lying. That, in fact, it does take away government sovereignty. It does give them the right to impose lockdowns and vaccine mandates. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at it ourselves. Because here is the vision from the draft that was released earlier this year. It says that, I just highlighted the word binding, how many times, that this draft was written with the intention of putting in place binding and some non-binding, legally binding elements. And what binding powers do they want? Well, they haven't exactly told us yet because this is still in draft. Here is from the draft that was released this February saying they want control of all of these things, such as to define what things are a pathogen or has pandemic potential. They want to define a One Health approach and also One Health surveillance. The things that are circled here in red are the things that I just found the scariest. You can highlight other things if you want. Infodemic, interpandemic, and also they want to define recovery. So they decide when it's over, when it's done. Now, again, potential seems to leave a lot of room for everything to become a pandemic. One Health surveillance, they're going to show us what that is. I'm going to show you more about it. Now, the word infodemic, I really don't like. Interpandemic, let's just, I don't know, like a pandemic within a pandemic. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Interpandemic, it could be several things at once. We don't know because they've left these undefined as of yet as they steamroll us into a vote to give them these powers, even though we don't know exactly what is written there. Now, the word infodemic is the thing that makes me the most upset because back in May, when the WHO revised other documents to lay the groundwork for the pandemic treaty, they defined infodemic this way. They say this new information ecosystem has generated a new health threat that accompanies epidemics and pandemics called infodemic. It's the overabundance of information, accurate or not, which makes it difficult for individuals to adopt behaviors that will protect their health and the health of their families and communities. The infodemic can directly impact health. Let me just finish this, and I do want to hear what you have to say.
Yep.
Infodemic cannot be eliminated. It can only be managed. And that's why WHO and partners have developed the approach of infodemic management. Now, I want you to look closely at the thing that says accurate or not, because they want to control information, even true information, if it means that your behavior is antithetical to what they want. So an infodemic can be true. And we've seen that a lot of the things that were shared during the COVID-19 pandemic turned out to be true and caused them a problem because it made people do behaviors that they didn't like. So infodemic is the thing that really keeps me up at night. David, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, fortunately, Google has a vaccine for that where they're going to inoculate us with the right information.
Right.
So,
that's right. What did they call it? Google is calling it...
I thought they called it inoculation.
Inoculation.
Information.
That's right. That's right. Now, how, I may ask you, how can they root out possible infodemics? How can they make sure you're not looking at true information that they don't want you to see? Oh, well, they call it social listening. This also is from the proposed pandemic treaty. They want to tackle false, misleading, misinformation, or disinformation with conducting regular social listening and analysis. Okay. Could another word for that be surveillance?
Spying, collaborating, and canoodling.
Excuse me.
Canoodling with
Canoodling.
I just feel like canoodling. They like to canoodle with the social media networks. You know, they have that back door. You know, so that they can canoodle with.
Well, the White House did that on behalf of information that came from the WHO, I suppose. But the WHO, as far as we know, has not had backdoor channels to social media. Although it's worth pointing out that if we are to say something that counters what the WHO says right now on YouTube, YouTube uses that as a basis to either remove or penalize videos. So the WHO does have that back end, at least on this platform. Was somebody
Well, and I want to point out too, Nikki Haley was just on Fox News, and here has the tweet, and she says every person on social media should be verified by their name because of national security.
National security, you say?
Yeah. So now verified by our name, then they would be able to better know what we're sharing and everything like that, and it would be verified so that they can, come after us if we share the wrong thing.
Yeah. I mean,
we're part of the wrong thing. If we're part of wrong thing, they'll come after us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Social listening, I just wonder, does that supersede the U.S. right to privacy or the European right to privacy or any other right to privacy? The WHO also in this pandemic treaty gives itself the right to redistribute everything, basically, where you buy your clothes, where the clothes are made, where the clothes are farmed, what sheep they come from, that thread, where your animals are butchered or slaughtered, where they are farmed, where they are grown, what vegetables are grown where. They literally say here that the parties will identify and integrate into relevant pandemic prevention and preparedness plans that addresses the drivers of the emergence and reemergence of disease at the human-animal environment interface, including but not limited to climate change, land use change, wildlife trade, desertification, and antimicrobial resistance. So by this, everything can be declared a possible climate risk. Oh, because those sheep graze there, that ammonia that they pee could lead to this, and that will possibly create some kind of disease, so we can no longer farm sheep, that kind of thing. Like literally anything can fall into that. So redistributing wealth, resources. The document also addresses strengthening healthcare workforce to make sure that the world, if they handle another pandemic, will not do so with the same gender disparities we had during the first one. They're really working on, and they're worried about the fact that the workforce of healthcare was not diverse enough. Here's what they say there, that we need to address gender disparities and inequalities within the healthcare workforce, more representation, engagement. I mean, was it a problem that there were too many women working in healthcare, and that was disproportionately hard for them? Was this a problem that there were not enough women, or there were too many women? Like, we know that the pandemic was disproportionately hard on women, and a lot of women who had their children at home, right? So they're saying they want more women to be, I'm not sure what they're saying. They just need to be focused on gender and it's a solution in search of a problem. Now, the document does say that it takes state sovereignty into consideration, that it's not meant to supersede your country's own laws and rules and ability to govern itself. But they did change their international health regulations back in May of 2023, meaning that not just the pandemic document is going to supersede state sovereignty, but mere participation in the WHO could supersede your state sovereignty. Here's the document we talked about that was changed in the spring. These edits go with the pandemic treaty powers, meaning they're just revamping their overall powers in anticipation of the pandemic treaty. You can already see how this is going to go based on the first page of edits, where they say that their recommendations they cross out non-binding. No, they're binding. Like, let's not write that anymore. This is where we're going. That's their edits, you guys, not mine. And does it only kick in when we're in a pandemic? No, it kicks in only when they feel like we are in the need to prepare, or they think that possibly, that it's just the underlying text here means that this is new text proposed. So they want these powers to prepare for a pandemic. We won't even need to have one for them to have this power. And they can work with potential all risks to public health, not just actual risks, but potential. This is the graphic I made when we first went over this back in February, and I stand by it. This, if you read the document, does in fact give the World Health Organization the right for your country's government to define the next pandemic, determine lockdown. So if you say live in a place like Sweden, who says we're not locking down, we think that, we can handle this through another way. The WHO absolutely could make your country do it. They can survey you. They can determine the treatments. They can put in place vaccine mandates. They absolutely control the vaccine distribution and the intellectual property and profits. And they can redistribute basically everything, including farmland. What do they call it? Human interaction, human land use, wildlife trade, animal environment interface is what they called it. And the biggest problem with this is that we don't need it. The WHO did a crap job during the COVID pandemic, and we as humans, we got through it. We're here now. We don't need them to show us that they can do another crap job by having more powers. This is the last organization you would look to as a success in order to get more powers. But again, they're taking these powers under the auspices of emergency. So I brought one of my favorite quotes from Herbert Hoover, that didn't roll off the tongue, says, every collectivist revolution rides in on a Trojan horse of emergency. It was the tactic of Lenin, Hitler, and Mussolini. It is the collectivist sweep over a dozen minor countries of Europe, and it was the cry of men striving to get on horseback. And emergency became the justification of the subsequent steps. The technique of creating emergency is the greatest achievement that demagoguery attains. Demagoguery. I'm sorry, you guys. So again, now having reviewed the actual documents of the pandemic treaty, let's again look at Dr. Tedros' tweet saying that it will not impose lockdowns or vaccine mandates, and it will not supersede your country's sovereignty, and that talking about it, countries should prevent us from talking about it in a way that they think is spreading lies, fake news, and conspiracy theories. He's lying. I'm sorry, but he is. That's a lie. And in the U.S., there is a movement to demand that the president and Congress not sign this treaty and, in fact, withdraw totally from the WHO, which I support. We had Dr. Kat Lindley,
Cat Lindley.
on the show last week, telling us all about this. In the UK Parliament, there also is discussion about this. Tell your elected representatives that you do not support this, unless you do, and in which case, tell me why. Because to me, it's lunacy.
Maybe you support Bill Gates. Bill Gates, 88% of the WHO's philanthropic funding comes from Bill Gates. So 88%. So I saw someone in the chat saying, who funds the WHO? Well, there's one of your big answers.
Yeah, I think Bill Gates is up to 80% or something like that.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.